Hello. All right, so this is a big one. This is pattern making fundamentals for the 3D artist. Now, as always, I should point out that I did not go to fashion school. I am not professionally trained with this. Everything I'm going to be trying to explain to you, I've learned from watching YouTube videos or reading books or mainly just my own experience. So if I get something wrong, which I very well might have, I do apologize for that, and but I've tried to keep it to stuff that I can give solid examples for. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this and you learn a lot. All right. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, and really the most important thing, are darts. And I'm really not exaggerating when I say that darts are, if you understand darts, you understand patterns. A pattern is nothing but a bunch of darts, really. Almost any shape on a pattern, aside from a very few, can actually be distilled down to some variation of a dart. So darts are extremely important, and that's what we're going to be starting with. Let me just go ahead and make a really quick front shirt here, and then we'll get started. All right, so we've built this shirt, and now I'm going to use some darts to fit it to the model here. Now, before I do that, I want to talk about the definition of a dart and what it is. So what is a dart? A dart is a way of reducing the length of a fabric in a certain area so that the fabric will contour and conform to the model underneath. Now, that's not a great explanation, so I'll give a demonstration of that and what this dart is and what it's doing. So the first type of dart that I want to talk about is the most easily recognizable type of dart, and that is, of course, the long, skinny diamond shape. And there's a tool for creating that, and it is right up here. It's called the dart. Now, to use this dart, I'm just going to drag it out on the front of my bodice here. And now I'm going to, well, before we get to placement, let's talk about the definition again, what I was saying. So what is this dart actually doing? At its basic, most fundamental level, what this dart is doing is it is reducing the length of this pattern piece right here by this much. So it's reducing it by 48.5 millimeters. So it's taking this pattern piece, which the width is 245 millimeters, or yeah, 254 millimeters, and it's reducing it by 45 millimeters. Now, why is it doing that? Well, if we look at the model underneath, we can see that right here, if we look at the length, the diameter from, or I guess the length, I don't know if it's the diameter. Anyway, if we look at the length from here to here, this is actually, this distance is shorter than the length up here. So if we measured the length from up here to up here, that would be a longer distance than the distance from here to here. And so what this dart is doing is it is just reducing the length of this fabric so that it will match the curvature of the body underneath right here. Now that we know that, we understand where to place the dart. The dart, the widest part of the dart, which is reducing the fabric the most, needs to be placed where it aligns about with the smallest part of the waist. And that is true of any dart you place on a shirt like this. And what that dart is doing is it's just helping the fabric to conform to the shape of the model. So now that we know that, we can just kind of go in and figure out about where this dart needs to go. So probably a little bit lower. And it's easy to adjust this, and you can do it, you know, whenever. Now, this is really, one of the reasons this is so important is because when you're looking at a pattern and you see a pattern that has darts in it, the darts aren't there because the pattern says they should be there. The darts are there because that pattern was built on a specific model. And that model that the pattern was designed to fit on had a waist that was specific in shape. And so the dart is placed for that model. If your model shape is different, and if you're a 3D artist, your model shape will often be very different. You have to adjust the placement of the dart to fit your model. So the dart is determined not by the pattern, it's determined by your model. And that's so important to understand. Because if your dart is in the wrong place, things aren't going to fit right. So I really want you to understand that dart placement, again, I'm going to reemphasize, it's determined by the model and not by the pattern. Okay, let's continue to talk about placement now. Now that we've figured out where the widest part of the dart goes, and let me just sew this up real quick here. So sew that up. Okay, we figured out where the widest part of the dart goes. Now let's figure out where this needs to go. The top of the dart here needs to go toward what we call the bust apex. Now, the bust apex is the widest part of the bust, but for normal people, it's generally the nipple. Now, you don't call it the nipple, you call it the bust apex. So let's just put this going toward the bust apex. And this is still too high, so you want it to go toward the widest part of the bust. Okay. So you'll notice I also said it should go toward the bust apex. One thing you'll notice in a lot of patterns is that these darts, like that go toward the apex, often don't go all the way to it. And one of the reasons for that is easing. And what happens is that if this dart point goes all the way right to the top of the apex, you can get a little bit of slight puckering right in here, a little, and you don't really want that. If you leave it a little bit short, what'll happen is that the widest part of the bust will be, it'll kind of push out on the fabric, and it'll force this part of the dart to smooth out just a little bit. So when you're creating these darts that go toward the apex, it's good to leave them just a little bit short, and not necessarily go all the way to the apex. Now, the other thing that's really important is you never want to go over the apex. That is going to cause a lot of issues, because obviously you're taking out diameter right here in the place where you need the most width. And so it's very important when you're placing these darts like this to never go over the bust apex. You go toward the apex, but never over it. And so that is how you fit a dart like this. And now, of course, toward the bottom, it's a similar thing. Most of the time, you're not going to have a really super long shirt. So these darts, when they go this way, should just kind of go down pretty close to the bottom. There's nothing special about it. If you do have a long shirt, just make sure your dart doesn't go all the way down here. And that's pretty much dart placement on the front of a shirt. All right. So we've talked about darts on the front of a shirt. Let's talk about darts on the back. Now, this is going to be especially important in stylized characters, because a lot of times stylized characters have really hollow backs, very curved backs, and so you'll get a lot of bagginess in the back of a shirt. So what we can do is we can use darts again to take in some of this bagginess. And I'm going to use the same long diamond shaped dart, and we're just going to drag it out right here. Now, one mistake I see a lot of people make is they make their back darts too wide. What you never want to do is have a dart look like this. What'll happen is that this will cause a lot of deformation. It'll cause a lot of pinching right up here and right down here, and it just doesn't look very good. So don't make your darts like this. that's too much. And don't make your darts small and diamond shaped like that. Okay. So you can see what's happening. It's causing a lot of pinching. The longer and narrower your dart is, the less deformation you're going to get like this. So what if you need this much diameter taken out of the back because you have a very hollow back, but you don't want to use, but you don't want this type of dart? What are you going to do? Well, that's pretty simple, actually. You just want to create two separate darts, two smaller darts next to each other. So all we have to do is create one dart like this, and I'll just kind of extend it out, place it right there. And then this could probably be a little bit wider. And then just copy and paste it over and make them kind of evenly spaced all along the back here. And now you're taking out this much diameter, like quite a bit, but in two separate darts, so the overall deformation is going to be much less. This is the same concept of corsets and well, yeah, corsets, where they have a lot of smaller pieces with smaller transitions to create that smooth shape. So when you're working in the back, instead of having one large dart, try and have two smaller darts. Now the same principle applies here. We want to align the widest part of the dart with the smallest part of the back. So this probably needs to go down a little bit, and you can just kind of judge it and figure it out, and that should probably go about right there. And that might even be, these darts might even be a little bit too wide. So I'll just shrink them up a little bit, because I don't want it to be tight against the back. I want a little bit of looseness in the fabric, okay? So that is how you create those diamond-shaped darts in the back. Now, a couple things to note back here. One is, even though you want long, skinny darts, you don't want to make the darts go too high up the back. They can go fairly high up the back, but you don't want it to go across about right here, because there's actually, well, maybe even a little bit lower than that. There's actually another apex on on the back here, and that's right at the shoulder blade. And we'll actually talk about this a little bit later, but some models have a much stronger shoulder blade apex than this model does. So just keep in mind not to make your back darts go across the shoulder blade up here. I think that's about it for these back darts. They work the same way. Again, align them with the front dart here so that the smallest part of the waist is being cinched the most. All right, cool. All right, so what I want to talk about now is the side seam. Now, the side seam, well, not technically called a dart, it is actually a dart. And you see this especially on women's clothing. Well, I guess men's clothing too often has shaping to the side seam. But this shaping on the side seam, this is, again, it's a dart. And we can see that here. I'm just going to add in a couple of points on the side seam here, and we will align them on the x-axis so that they're all lined up. And then I'll just move these out. And when you move these out and align this up and match that up, you can see that this side seam is just another dart. And it should work the same way as these other darts. The widest part right here should be aligned with the smallest part of the waist. And again, that's just taking out all of this length from the center part of the fabric where the diameter is the smallest around the waist. So when we do that and simulate, you can see that this cinches up the entire shirt very nicely. Now, one mistake I've seen a lot of people make, well, not a lot, some people make, is that they'll try and fit the entire shirt using only the side seam or only a back dart. It's better if you really need to fit a shirt that's on a character that's got a lot of curves. It's better if you divide up the darts like this rather than just have one large dart, because you saw what happened in the back with the one large dart. You got all that pinching and deformation. And again, this is the concept of a corset, where you have a lot of small changes that affect the overall shape. So actually this front dart is even too big, so let's Scale that down a little bit. And so when you have all of these darts combined and added up, they add up to actually, if we just combined all of these widths into one single dart, it would be an extremely large dart, but we've divided it up all the way around the garment here. So that's how these diamond-shaped darts work on a bodice. And in general, that's how darts work for everything. They are taking out a length of fabric, and it is this length of fabric where it is needed. And in this case, it is needed around the waist. This fabric is needed to be removed so that the garment will fit. So anyway, yeah, those are diamond-shaped darts. So next we'll move on to just the V cutout shaped darts. So I'll see you in a sec. All right, so we've done the diamond-shaped darts. Now let's talk about the V-shaped darts that come in from the edge of the fabric. And these are these types of darts you're probably going to be using a lot more. Actually, they're much more useful, I think. Anyway, they work basically the same way as the diamond-shaped darts. What they're doing is they're just removing this diameter or this amount of fabric from an edge. And one of the most common places you'll see it is right in here. And this always happens when you have when you're designing something with a woman's bust. You'll get this kind of gap right here, and that has to do with the length of fabric that's needed to go around here. But then it needs to shrink down, and fabric can't just automatically shrink to fit things. It needs help. It needs a dart in here. So to create this dart, what I like to do is I just like to create 3 pivot points like this, or 2 pivot points, and delete all the curve points. Well, first let's talk about another way to create a dart, and that is just to create one segment point about where you need it. So I'd want it to go about right here, and I'm looking at that fabric, and I just want it to go at about, you know, the top of where that fabric is. So let's do that. Well, this is fine. Anyway, you just take one segment point, and you can right click on it, and you can add dart, and then you get this dialog box where you can precisely put in the right amount, the right width of a dart that you want. I don't like doing it this way because I don't need to be that precise. When I'm creating a dart here on the edge of the fabric, what I'm doing, so I'll just create 2 segment points, and then I'll delete all the curve points, and then I'll add another point in here. I'm constantly adjusting the dart to get the right fit because I don't care about the measurements. I care about how it fits. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it fit on the model, and then I can go back and say, okay, so now that this fits, I can look at my measurements and say that's, you know, 92 millimeters. If I were to actually try and input it specifically to begin with, that's just a waste of time for this type of thing. So anyway, I'll just kind of eyeball it and say, okay, I'll do about like this, and I'll sew it shut and look and see if that fits correctly. Now, one thing you want to always watch out for with these side darts is if you made a dart, let's do this a lot real quick here, and you started your dart from a different position, such as up here, and I'll just split that, and then put it down like this. Your dart legs, the sides of your dart, they're called the dart legs, are uneven. So when you're making a side dart, always watch out and make sure that these dart legs are even. And the way you even them up is just, you know, pulling it out and kind of, I just eyeball it. And if it's within a millimeter or 2, it's fine. I'm not super precise on that. So that's, you know, 1/16 and 1/18, things like that. So that's the one main thing you really need to watch out for. Oops. And you want your darts to be straight. You don't want any curvature. At this point, we don't want any curvature in our dart. So just do that. And then again, this dart works the same as this diamond-shaped dart here. It should go toward the apex, but never over it. And so it'll look like that. And then sew it up. That's off by 2.7, that's fine. And then if that's too tight, you can just kind of adjust your dart here Or if there's not enough, you can bring it back out and just figure out the right width of the dart so that the fabric fits nicely right in this area. So that is the basic idea of using these diamond-shaped darts. Okay, now what I want to talk about is one other area where you're going to see darts, these V-shaped darts a lot. And that is over on the back of your pattern. And remember how I said there was an apex here? Now, this model does not have a very prominent shoulder blade, but some models have very prominent shoulder blades that you're going to be working with. And what'll happen is you'll get a lot of gapping right in here, like you did on the front here. Now, I'm not getting a lot here, but sometimes you do. And to fix that, you can create a dart in the back right in here. And I'm going to create one even though I don't actually need it, but you might have a model that needs this. So you have your shoulder blade apex right up here. And actually, sometimes this dart, if you have a secondary dart up here, can interfere with this area. So you might want to just bring the top of this dart down a little bit. And so you get that angle right there so that this part of the shoulder can be left alone. Now, again, I'm just going to create that dart the same way. I'm going to add some points and pull it in. And this dart should go toward the shoulder blade apex because this part of the back right here, this is the widest part of the back. This is the part that needs the most diameter. But up in here, it starts, the shoulders, they kind of slope inwards, and so you don't need quite as much fabric here. So you often have this dart right in the back here. And this one is actually going to need to be pretty small. And placement is going to be pretty important. You want to place it right so that, because if it's too high or too low, it won't bring in the fabric correctly. I'm not sure exactly how to explain it, but just try and line it up with that shoulder blade apex there. And then check your line lengths. This is off by 4.1, so bring this out a bit. And again, what that's doing is it's just reducing the overall length of this armhole, and so that it will cinch down tighter on the arm here, or on the shoulder. It'll fit next to the shoulder a lot better rather than having a bunch of gaps in the armhole, like sometimes happens a lot. Okay, so those are generally the most common areas where you're going to see darts in a bodice or a shirt like this. All right, now before I move on, I want to go on a little bit of a tangent here and talk about something else that's really important, especially in the rest of this video, and that's angles. Now, specifically what I'm going to be talking about here are the angles that happen when you create a dart on the edge of fabric like this. So when you have these darts on the edge, the dart just doesn't just remove that excess fabric and everything is good. The dart on the edge of fabric will deform that edge. And I've got a picture that I can show you, right? Let's find it here. So when you create a dart on the edge of fabric, what happens is it actually goes in like this, but it pulls the fabric at a V shape and it pulls it down and in. And so you always have to keep in mind that this deformation is happening when you create a dart. Because if you had a nice smooth armhole here, which I did before, when you put in a dart, it's going to create this little pinching shape, and it's going to not only create that V shape, but that V shape, it's going to pull the fabric in. So it's actually affecting the fit of things. So you have to go back and adjust it. Now, the way I usually do it is I just go in and I just know that this needs to come down a little bit, and I'll look at the 3D window and we'll just adjust the curves over here to return this to a nice smooth shape. And also, since when it pulls in, when that deforms, it pulls in as well, you always have to extend the dart out this way to return it back to a good position that you want it to be. And so that's the way I do it. And I've been doing this for a long time, so I just kind of know what shape it needs to be in. But when you actually look at this in the 2D window and you look at this pattern, if you didn't know what was happening, you'd be a little bit confused, because you'd say, well, wait a minute, this curve kind of goes off this way and this curve kind of goes off this way. This doesn't look right in the 2D window. But if I were to actually merge this dart together, which I'll do here, and I'll just cut this piece off, I'll take this and we'll match it up. You can see that this curve, when it's closed like this, this actually becomes, this actually looks right when it's when it's matched up together like this. And what you can do is you can actually work, if you're confused about how to alter the edge of a dart, you can just cut you can find an area on a pattern and just kind of cut it off, and then merge the two dart pieces up, or not merge them, match them up. So you'd right click, match up, and I'll just match up this dart. And if your dart is like this, which is kind of how it started, you can just you can just adjust the shape while the two edges are matched up, and that way you can kind of visualize what's happening better. And then when you're done, just go ahead and take these two edges and merge them back together. Never be afraid to just cut and merge things. Because you can do that with a digital pattern. It doesn't matter how many times you cut it and merge it back together, it's gonna be fine. That's more difficult to do with a real life pattern, but with digital, just cut and merge if you ever need to. You do the same thing back here. Now, obviously there isn't as much deformation back here because it's a much smaller dart, but there is a little bit. So right in here, I'll just kind of bring this in a little bit so this angle's in. And we can look at that. Let's go ahead and undo that. And so over here, all you got to do is find any place on the side of a pattern. And I could cut over here if I wanted, like this, just an empty place on a pattern, and merge it together or match it up. And my dart legs are not quite the same length. And you can see that there is a little bit of a pinch right in there. So I'll just pull that out a little bit until this curve is really smooth, and then just merge these two pieces back together. And you can delete that segment point, and you have the original pattern back with your corrected dart on the edge. So this is important. Whenever you have a dart on the side of fabric, to remember that there is a deformation that happens and that you need to account for that. All right, so let's just go over a quick, let's just do a quick overview of what we did here. So we took this t-shirt shape, and using darts, we contoured the fabric to the model. Remember, that's the definition of darts. They remove a section of fabric to allow the fabric to fit and conform to the body. That's what darts do. Now, what darts do not do, I want to emphasize this point, because a lot of people, I think, get kind of confused about this. Darts and the pattern in general, the overall pattern, do not give the garment structure. The structure comes from the model. And I've seen a lot of people kind of complain about, oh, this garment didn't fit because the pattern, it wasn't a good pattern. That's almost never the case. You could have the best pattern in the world, made by the best pattern maker in the world, but if the pattern is not specifically made, if your model does not look exactly like the model that pattern was designed for, it's not going to work. So what is really the most important part to understand is what function the elements of the pattern are doing to the garment. And so when we look at this dart, we know, okay, so this dart here is cinching in fabric around the waist. This dart here is bringing in the armhole. bringing in this excess fabric around the armhole, and so is this one. And we'll learn more about variations on these darts coming up, but I just really want to emphasize that point, that the pattern does not give the garment structure. The pattern only contours the fabric onto the model, and the model determines the structure and generally the overall shape of the pattern. So yeah, that's my point with all of this, and we will continue on with more of that coming up. So I'll see you in just a sec. Okay, I'm back. So what I want to talk about now is dart manipulation. Now, dart manipulation is actually really cool, and I find it really fun and exciting. And dart manipulation is like the bread and butter of how you would create your own patterns or just work with patterns. It's really important to understand, but it's really fun, so that's good. Now, with this front bodice pattern, I do want to talk about something real quick here, and that's this really large dart in the front. Now, in an earlier part of this video, I talked about how you don't want to make your darts too wide. That's bad. Don't do that. But you might look at this pattern and say, okay, so why is there this enormous dart on the front? Why can you do that? Well, the answer is pretty simple, and it will transition into dart manipulation pretty well also. So when you think about this front bodice here, if you really simplify the shapes down, it's just kind of a cone shape. Now what I have over here is a cone shape, like this. Now to create this cone shape, you just make a circle and then a larger circle, and then you take out this extremely large, or this piece out of it, and this is just a large dart. And it will naturally, the natural deformation that would occur actually creates a sphere shape, or not a sphere shape, a conical shape. And so when you take this and you make two of them, essentially, this essentially becomes the shape of the front bodice. So that's basically what happens when you make this extremely large dart in the front. Now, why can you do this on the front and not the back, where I was talking about earlier, where you need a large dart? Well, that's because the back is not a cone shape. It's more of a flat plane. And so if you tried to create this extremely large dart in the back, again, you saw what happened. It would pinch in on the sides rather than just have that more straight angle that you need in the back. So that's the reason you can't do it. You can do it in the front, but you can't do it in the back. Now, the reason this transitions nicely into dart manipulation is because, well, let me show you a diagram really quick. And let me find that here. So if you've ever been on Pinterest or Google image search and you've looked for patterns, you've probably come across a diagram that looks something like this. Now, what this is showing you is the locations of darts that you can put on a front bodice. Now, the thing about these darts is they're all doing basically the same thing. And it's showing you all of these darts, but in reality, you could dart from any angle at all. This is just showing you like traditional dart locations that have names. Like if you darted from down here, this is called a French seam or French dart, and they all have different names. And that's a little bit hard to understand, but if you look at this simple cone shape right here, what you can do is you can create a line from anywhere right here, and you can cut and sew and merge that together. And this cone shape doesn't change at all. It doesn't matter where this seam location is, as long as it goes to the center, and it could be at some weird angle or even some weird shape like this. And if you cut and sew and merge it together, this is a very odd shape, but the actual shape of this cone doesn't change. And that's the basic fundamental principle of dart manipulation. Now, what I was going to also show you is you can think of this bodice, right? Well, let's just look at this diagram again real quick. So all of these darts here are performing the same function. They're just changing the location of where the volume is being removed. Now, there are slight differences in fit because obviously this is not a perfect sphere, but generally these are not going to change the shape of the bodice very much. So when you think about this bodice here, or the front section, you can actually think that this is built on a cone. So I've done that over here. I've created this cone shape, and you can kind of understand how this front bodice works when you have that one extremely large dart. So that creates that general shape right there, and then the front bodice is just on top of it, or cut out of it, I guess. So you do that on two sides, and that is why that shape works like that. Okay, just move this way. Now let's go ahead and actually show you in action how this dart manipulation principle works. So since I have this dart all the way up, right up to the bust apex here, I've gone all the way up, I can rotate this dart around any way I want. So I can cut and sew. And I'll go ahead and merge those. And so now I've moved my dart over to here. Turn seam lines on. Now when I simulate, it's slightly changed the fit a little bit, but not much. It's basically the same fit. And I can do that in any direction. I could have it go up here, cut and sew, merge. And so this pattern right here, this looks really, really funny, right? And sometimes you will see darts in this location and you'll see, why is the dart here? What's going on? But it's just moved. If you think of it as that conical shape, it makes a lot more sense what's actually happening. It's just moved the location of the dart. So when I simulate again, it's the bodice still fits pretty much the same. You can even go over to here, cut and sew, merge. So now your dart is in there, and again, it still fits. So that's the basic principle of dart manipulation. So I'll go through it and look at a few more examples. All right, so here's one that really confused me when I first started out, and that's this back shoulder dart right here. When I first started doing this stuff, I would see this dart in the back shoulder, and this happens on fitted dress shirts and blazers. You'll see this, and I couldn't figure out what it was doing. Well, once you understand pattern manipulation, you can kind of figure out, and remember, I talked about this apex in the back shoulder, like the top of the shoulder blade here. And so when you know that, you understand this dart is actually this dart that went over to the side of the armhole. So let's go ahead and cut and sew that. And then we'll just merge these two pieces together. And then you can, when you simulate, the fit is basically the same. I probably should have, well, it's not quite right at the apex point, but it's the same. You get the idea. This dart is this dart that goes up to here because of dart manipulation. And sometimes you'll also see this dart go over into the neckline here. So let's cut and sew that, and we'll merge this. And again, this dart here is doing the same thing that it was doing up here, and it's doing the same thing that it was doing over here. It's just in a different location. So when you see, one thing to keep in mind is when you're looking at a pattern and you see some crazy shape, don't always assume that it's doing something crazy. A lot of times the dart has just been manipulated in a way that makes the pattern look unusual. So what you want to try and do is figure out how that dart has been manipulated, and if you can figure out where it started from a more logical location that you can understand, and then you'll start to understand patterns. A lot of patterns use this dart manipulation in some way, and so once you understand it, things just make sense. Okay. Okay, so what I want to talk about now is kind of how to modify this bodice piece right here into a different type of bodice piece that you'll occasionally see. And it's a good example of pattern manipulation as well. So what I have here is, it's essentially a crop top, but what if I wanted to extend the shirt all the way down to the waist, or down to the hips, right? And just make the other half. So what you can't do is you can't just make another big dart on the bottom. That doesn't work. And that's because the stomach is kind of flat. It doesn't have, the curvature that you would need to have a really large dart. So that doesn't work. So how do we do this? Well, the way I'm going to do it is like this. So I'm going to add a secondary dart up here for now. So I'm going to make a line there, and I'm going to cut and sew. And now I'm going to match up these 2 points here. I'm going to move my pivot point over to here and rotate. Oops. Rotate that down until we have a dart that's more reasonably sized. Much like the one we had on the shirt we did at first. So something like that. And then I'll just draw out a rectangle here that'll be the bottom half of my shirt. And what I'll do is I'll just sew from here to here. Sew from here to that little snap where the sewing is now even. Then I'll add a point on the end there. And then, let's see, I need to match these up. Wait, oh no, I don't. Okay, so I'll just cut this. So I just want that to be, that's fine. Okay, and then I'll sew from here to here and from here to here. So it again snaps to there. I'll add a point to the end and we'll just cut this off. Okay, so now I've got these two pieces that are gonna be the rest of the shirt there. So I'm gonna match this up like this. Match. I'll delete all these curve points and match this one up. So now what I want to do is I just want to create the dart. So I'll add in 2 segment points, and I'm just gonna go until they match up. So they go down the middle like that. That's fine. Oops, match that up. So I'm just kind of piecing this shirt together, or the bottom half of this together from 2 separate pieces, which is fine because we can always merge it together. So now this looks like that shirt we had at the beginning. So now all I need to do is just merge this in here and merge this in here. So those are merged, and we don't want to merge down here or anything. Now all we need to do is merge this shut up here. And then this happens. So if you've ever seen something like this on a pattern, this looks like, how can this possibly work at first? But if you divide it up here, so I'm just going to cut and sew this again. Let's go ahead and match that up. Or match that up. If you just do this and look at it this way, this pattern makes sense because you can see the dart here, you can see the dart here, and it looks like a proper pattern. But when you actually close this, it's not changing anything. It's just moving the dart locations, and it creates this funny looking pattern, but it works, and it works exactly the same as this pattern. So try not to be afraid when you see these really bizarrely shaped patterns. It's just try and figure them out. It's not always the easiest thing, but it's kind of fun. I like figuring stuff like this out. But that is another really basic usage of dart manipulation to create these patterns. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. Now we'll move on. All right. Okay, so what I want to talk about now are curved darts. And what I mean by curved darts are the convex and concave type darts, where the curvature, there's opposing curvature on either side of the dart. So most of the time you're going to be using just these regular standard diamond straight edge darts. The times when you're going to want to use these curved darts is when you're working with some with a garment that fits very closely to the body, a tight garment such as a corset or just a very tight top. Because the curved darts like this, they add shaping to help the garment contour to the body. So let's go ahead and take a look at this and show you exactly what is happening. So if I have a dart that is curved in like this, let me look at this and simulate. You can see that it creates a curvature outwards like this. And if we look at the original dart location right here, you can kind of tell why that's happening. You can see that this curvature that I've added in the dart, it's basically just added a little bit of extra diameter to the fabric right here. And then it tapers off down here and down here. So that pushes the fabric outwards this way. So it creates a curve out. Now, I don't have any really fancy technical definition or some creative demonstration to show you what's happening here. You just kind of have to remember that when you curve, there's two opposing curves like this, things curve outward. Likewise, when you curve darts like this way, they curve inwards. So that's really all there is to these curved type darts in terms of how they work. Okay, now that we've talked about the shaped contoured darts, I want to talk about darts that aren't actually called darts, but they're darts. Okay, so the most common place you're going to see this, well, I guess the most common place you'll see this is the side seam. And let me talk about the side seam really quick. In the earlier part of this video, I did a shirt with the side seam on it. Now, in that video, I made the side seam just a V shape. In reality, or in normal making of clothes, that side seam is almost never just a straight V shape. It's almost always got shaping to it. So, and the reason you can see is because there's a lot of curvature right around this hip area right here. So if you just had a straight curve, it would work, but it works much better if you have a little bit of shaping to this side seam. So this side seam is essentially a shaped dart. Now, one thing I want to talk about real quick is that I see this sometimes and it drives me nuts. A side seam should never look like this. This is not good. So what happens is that, well, it just doesn't work with the curvature of the body. When you connect these two lines like that on a side seam, the shirt will flare out and kind of pinch at the ends. And that's because you've got this acute angle right here. When a side seam ends, it should end pretty close to straight. So you want this curve back here. So you want it to kind of straighten out, or if it flares like this, if it does flare, and generally you want this curve in here because this curve represents the curvature of the hip. But if it does end in an acute angle like this, always make sure that the angle coming off is at, it starts at a 90-degree angle. Like initially, this angle here, if it is curved outward, should start at a 90-degree angle, and the same on both sides. And I'm going to talk about angles more a little later on, but angles, this initial angle coming off here is super important to make your side seam look correct and not have that weird flare and pinch. Okay. Okay. So these are princess seams, and princess seams are a type of seam that has the dart built right in. Now, if you've ever seen a pattern like this, that probably looks pretty scary and confusing, but it's not, because again, these are just darts. So when you look at a pattern like this, you don't want to think of this as a bunch of pieces with random curves applied to them that just magically make an outfit when you sew them together. Just break it down into the shapes. So if we line these up like this, so let's go ahead and match this up like that, we can see that this is a dart here, like that. So you got a dart in there, and then you've got your diamond shaped dart in here, and well, it's a pretty bad dart, but you get what I'm saying. Each one of these is just darts. Now, this looks pretty difficult to make, but it's actually not. So let's go ahead and show you how to make this. Okay, so what I've got here is just a regular shirt that have a bunch of darts in it. I think this is the same one from the beginning part of the video. And what I want you to notice about this is the fit. If we look at how this shirt fits, it fits basically exactly the same as this did up here. So when you're trying to create a shirt like this that has those princess seams, or a dress that has those princess seams in them, the first thing you want to do is just make a top that fits. It fits very snugly. And just use your regular darts, because this is easy to do. So now all we have to do is convert them into shaped darts. And that's pretty easy to do as well, because we already have the darts in here. So now we just need to put some shaping in them. So I'm going to draw a line right here and draw a line right there. And oops. There we go. And I'm just going to cut this apart. So I'm going to cut and sew. So now we have our piece that we just need to add some shaping on. So let's just go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I'm first going to work on this part. And I'm actually going to uniform split this and uniform split this. Because, and then I'm going to, let's see, just convert these to curve points. Now, in practice, actually creating the curvature in your princess seam can be a little tricky. It's not hard on a understanding level, but actually doing it can be a little finicky, just because it's hard to adjust these points really well. It's not always the easiest thing. So anyway, I like to convert those to curve points. You can use Bezier points or any way you want to curve these. And then I'll curve these in here. And just keeping in mind the original shaping, we can kind of adjust this to a place where it's curved. And just look at your 3D window here and say, okay, this needs to go up a little bit. And then, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that sewing and delete that sewing. So I actually want to segment this sewing up. And the only reason I'm doing this is because it's easier to keep track of. For example, I know that this point right here is correct. That's the bust apex. So I want a sewing line here, but I want this sewing line down here to be broken up because that way I can just work on this one section. And if the length here is off, it won't affect this sewing and these lengths down here because I have it divided up with the segment point and the sewing lines. So that's one thing I like to do. Otherwise, if your sewing lengths get uneven, they're going to become uneven all the way down this seam, and it's much harder to adjust. So I just like to work in sections like this section, then this section, then the bottom section, so nothing gets too terribly messed up. So anyway, now we're just using these shaped darts, like we talked about, the convex and concave darts. And again, when you add some curvature out this way, it'll help go out and then bring it back in down here. And this is just going to be kind of getting it correct like that. And then we can check our strain map and oh wow, that actually did really well. And so you see with these princess seams, you can actually get really well-fitted clothing because these are essentially curved darts that contour to the shape of the body. So anyway, just add your shaping and then I'll come down here, convert these to curve points now. Maybe add some shaping in here. And there you go. Now and then once you're all finished, then you can convert everything to princess seams, or not, to curve points, so everything is really nice and smooth. And then just check and make sure everything fits. And then you have, oops, let's go ahead and smooth that out a little bit. Well, anyway, you can go in and make your tiny little adjustments. Now, one thing to really watch out for, especially on this part up here, is when you're making adjustments, these lengths can become uneven very easily, so you really want to watch out for that. But that's the way you can make princess seams. You make your just regular darts first, and then cut it, and then smooth the shapes. It's pretty simple. And that way you can create these kind of uneven, complex shapes that work together correctly. And it's the same process in the back. It's just I would put one dart in and then, you know, do the same thing. And that's how you end up with this. All right, so that's princess seams. All right, so we're done with darts, but not really. I'll explain that in a second. We're moving on to the other big part of sewing patterns, and that's curves. So why are curves so important and exciting, if I might add? Well, let me show you this. I've got this cone here, and uh-oh, where'd it go? Where'd you go? There you are. So I've also got this other plane that I'm going to cut it along. So this is a flat plane, and I'm just going to slice this cone right in half. So let me cut, or let's trace his internal line. I'll trace it as an internal line. And now I've created a perfectly straight cut across this cone. Now, if I go look at the actual pattern, that cut and the cone shape in general, but specifically this cut, even though it is a perfectly straight cut in the 3D window, is a curve on this pattern piece. And that is why curves are important. Because when you want to make something look straight or even, you have to account for the curvature of the fabric. And I'm gonna go over this and kind of explain some pretty cool stuff about curvature. But this, in a nutshell, is why curves are so important in pattern making. Okay, now before I really get started with curves, I want to talk about something. And that's the tool I'm going to be using a lot in this part of the video. It's called the fullness tool. And it is my absolute favorite tool in Clo3d. Now I say in Clo3d because this tool does not exist in Marvelous Designer. Now hopefully they'll add it into Marvelous Designer soon because it is really, really important. It creates curves, and as you're going to see in this part of the video, creating curves is an absolutely critical part to creating patterns, to fitting patterns, just everything. So the way the fullness tool works is you drag a line like this and drag a line like this, and then you can create curvature. You can bend the piece of fabric, and that creates curvature. So the way that you can kind of replicate this effect in Marvelous Designer is with the fullness point tool. This is called, I think it's still called the slash and spread tool in Marvelous Designer. And the way that works is you click and drag, and then you kind of bend at one angle. And this is kind of clunky because after you do this, you have to manually go in and convert these to curve points or Bezier curves and manually adjust the curve. It's not nearly as elegant or as good, but this is the alternate solution that for now you're going to have to use in Marvelous Designer. But for this video, I'm just going to be using the fullness tool, and hopefully, fingers crossed, Marvelous Designer will be adding that tool soon. All right. Okay, so curves, what are they? Now that seems like a really dumb question because a curve is just a curve, right? Well, there's a little bit more to it than that. A curve is basically just a dart. Now, that seems kind of crazy, But remember at the very beginning of this video where I said pretty much anything on a sewing pattern is basically a dart. Well, this is what I was talking about right here. So how are darts curves and vice versa? Well, I've got two pattern pieces right here, and one is just a rectangle and one is the same rectangle with a dart in it. And this dart is 100 millimeters wide. Now, if you'll remember, what darts do is they reduce the length of an edge. You know, that's what they do. They reduce the length of an edge. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pattern piece and curve it. So I'm going to use my fullness tool and curve this pattern piece here. So, oops, both. And I will reduce it by minus 100 millimeters. So I've got a curved piece here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this top piece with the dart and I'm going to line that up and merge this together. Now I'm going to use the smooth curve tool to smooth these out. Oops. Smooth that out like that and that out like that. And now what you can see is that these two pattern pieces are basically identical. This one's a little bit different just because the way smooth curve works, it curves it slightly differently than this, but they're almost identical. And so what happened up here with this dart is that when you have a curve, that's just a pattern piece with a dart where the dart has been extended out infinitely, basically. So when we think again to what the dart does, it reduces the length of an edge. This edge is shorter than this outer edge. This is how you reduce the length of an edge in a pattern. So that's what's really cool about curves is, well, there's a bunch of really cool things. This is just the first one. I'm gonna continue on and explain some stuff. I'm going to try and explain some stuff. I hope you'll bear with me because these curves are pretty complex and complicated, so I'm going to try and explain it. Just bear with me. All right. Okay, so you've got your pattern pieces, your curved pieces here. And as I was saying, the curvature is what creates, or is what shortens up the edge of the fabric. Now, you might be thinking, why can't I just shorten the edge of a fabric without curving it? What's wrong with that? Well, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take this line and I'm going to shorten it. Now, the problem that happens here is that you haven't just shortened this edge. You've actually lengthened these two edges over here. So if you look at this edge right here, this is 167. But when we look at this edge, that's 203. With these curves, when you create a curve like this, these edges on the over here, they stay the same length. And you can think of it like a bunch of spaghetti that's laid flat and pushed outwards. When you push that spaghetti outward, it creates a curve, right? And so, and it also lengthens that top edge. You can't just pull the spaghetti apart and keep it flat. When you pull it apart, it curves outwards. That's the principle that's kind of happening here. So when we take a pattern piece that looks like this and actually merge it up and create a cone out of it, like I had in the first demonstration, which I've done down here, and we can look at this. So I've sewn this shape shut to create a cone, and you can see it doesn't create a very nice cone at all. And one thing I really want you to notice is that in the 2D window, this is a perfectly flat, these edges are flat. But in the 3D window, the edges curve, right? And so what I really want you to know about this, or take away from this, is that even though a pattern piece can look perfectly flat and straight in the 2D window, that doesn't mean it's going to be perfectly flat and straight in the 3D window. And a lot of this does depend on context of how the fabric is curved, because sometimes if you just have a curvature, for example, in this pattern piece, a curved line like this, and you cut and sew, this isn't actually performing any function, even though it's a curved piece. It's just a curved seam. Okay, so the last point I want to make about these curves is about the actual edges. When you're looking at a sewing pattern, it's really easy to think of it as a puzzle where all the pieces interlock together. But that's the wrong way of thinking about it, because a lot of the time the pieces don't match up. They don't interlock, really nicely. What you need to think of these pattern pieces as is not shapes that are going together, but you need to think of them as lengths. And when you think about what happens when you sew two pattern pieces together, you're not sewing two shapes together. You're sewing a single thread to another single thread. And because that's kind of what a seam is, it's just a single thread. And so it almost doesn't matter what shape that thread is, as long as the length matches up. And so when you think about it, these edges are not shapes. They're just single threads that have a bunch of fabric attached on either side. And some of the fabric is bigger, some of it is smaller. And so when you think about it that way, it starts to make more sense in a pattern and how it's supposed to be used. Now, just a quick example of that. I'm going to sew this pattern piece here to this piece here. So I'm sewing, let's flip it around. I'm sewing a straight line to a curved line. However, this sewing line, it matches up in terms of length. And so when I simulate this, let's scoot it over, you can see that this matches up. But down here, you get this nice ruffly effect. And from what we know about this pattern piece now, we can understand why this ruffling happens. It's because this length here is longer. So if we had a pattern piece that was just a rectangle, a square rectangle, where this edge was the same length as this edge, and we sewed it on to, and we sewed, okay, so we sewed this edge to here, but we sewed it to this point so it would be smushed, you would get the same ruffle effect because this edge and this edge would be the same length. But using this curve, we've shortened this top edge, so this ruffle kind of angles out that way. And that's how you get that effect with that curve. And so, again, you need to think of these edges not as shapes, but as lengths. All right, now that we know about curves, what I want to talk about are angles. Now, I've touched on angles in some previous sections of this video, but we're really going to go all in on angles right now because angles are super important. And I know I say this a lot, but I really mean it this time. I see people make this mistake all the time. And this is the one that I actually do see people make all the time. And that's the angles. So let's say this is one of your pattern pieces right here. Let's say it's the maybe A-line skirt or something like that. Let's just say that. And that's the front panel. And then you'd have the back panel. If we remember this cone shape down here, we know that a straight line on the cone results in a curve. And so when you're looking at, if you just had a front panel and a back panel on a skirt like this, you'd say, well, I don't really have a cone here, but you do because look, you've got these two darts here. And remember, if you smooth a dart out all the way along, it creates a curve. So this is essentially creating a cone. So that's why you would need to create a curvature like this to make the hem look straight in 3D. Now, you'd also need, wherever it's sewn onto, you'd need curvature up here. Okay, like that. And when you see a dart like this, you can kind of understand why the dart, any dart you put into fabric needs curvature this way also. So what's really important is this angle right here, this initial starting angle. That should be 90 degrees, should be perpendicular. And And same over here, because that initial start point needs to be perpendicular like this, and then it can curve off after that. But that initial junction, it shouldn't, each one doesn't have to be 90 degrees on its own. Like here, this is a good example. So sometimes you'll have a seam that's actually angled. So if I cut and sew here and then merge here. So now you can see that this angle here, this is not 90 degrees. This is a very acute angle, but when it's put together with this angle over here, or this one right here, an obtuse angle, they add up to 180 degrees. So it needs to be that initial start angle. After that, they can go in their separate directions, but that will make both lines appear level and connect at a level position. So that's kind of how angling works. Now let's go over to my pattern and actually fix it up, because I purposely made this bad so we can look and see what we need to do. So as you can see, this might initially look like a good pattern, but there's no shaping on the bottom hem here. And now that we know what these darts are doing, because they're making a cone shape, they're going in like this, that means there needs to be a counter curve on the bottom of these hems to make them appear straight. And you can see that right there. And so that's why you need to add in this curvature. And as you can see, the other thing we're doing is we're coming off at about a 90-degree angle right there. This is called truing your seams or something. There's a sewing term, truing something for this. Anyway, so go ahead, go in and figure out, and I just eyeball this, just kind of looking at your 3D window and figure out what needs to go where. But once you know what you're trying to do, it's a little bit easier to say, okay, I need to do this. And then, all right, let's look right over here. Now this is an example of a seam that needs to be fixed. So I'm gonna match these up. And we can see that this right here, it comes off at an angle like this when the seams are matched up. This needs to, right here, this needs to be 180 degrees. So let's just curve that up like that. And so now this seam comes off smoothly. Now, obviously, we still need to fix this right here. So let's just bring that up till it's about 90 degrees there. And then you can see that made it nice and flat there. Oh, we need to bring that up a bit. And so now this hem is nice and smooth. And we'll do the same thing on the pants, because obviously the pants, even though they're straight here, they are angled up, and you can see the angle right here. Now, obviously, the body isn't a perfectly round cone. There are some angles around the hips that are more angled than the other, like the front of the body here is more flat, so you don't need as much angling right in here, but over here, it's going to need more. So it dips a little bit more there, and it straightens out up here, and that creates that nice straight hem. And that's just because the change of the angle in the body affects the curvature you need to put on the hem. And right here, you can see that this angle is too much. It needs to be closer to 90 degrees, like that. And then there's not much that needs to happen here. Maybe just a slight bit of curvature there. And there you go. Now you have, well, let's pull it back up here. This is too low. So just looking at your 3D window, now your hems are straight. And that is why you need to straighten your hems, and that is how you straighten them. So this is really important. Make sure all your angles are good, because angles are important. All right. Okay, now very quickly, I want to talk about one more thing that just drives me insane. And I whenever I see this, it drives me nuts. Okay, and that's this area of the pants. So often I'll see people make this pointy, very pointy point on the pants here, and this is not correct. Let's look at this. So let me hide these. So you can see what's happening. And this also relates back to the angle thing that I was talking about. The angle from this seam, which is a straight seam. So we can just think of this seam as a straight line, even though it's a little bit curved. It's still just a straight line. This initial angle from here to here should be 90 degrees. It can even be less than 90 degrees. It can angle kind of up this way, and you can have a little bit of a dip there. But it should never be pointy like this, because it will make the pants fit like a W, which you don't want, and it goes up like this. So always watch out for this, and it's very easy to fix. We just have to bring this in a little bit until this. Okay, so we're about 90 degrees there, and you can see that there. And then over here. And don't go up and under here in your pants. Don't make like a U shape, or I guess that's a J shape in there. That's no good. You just want a smooth transition. And you have to look at this angle and this angle. So let's just fix that up. And maybe even a little bit shallower in the front. And we'll pull it down as well. So I just want to point this out, so because I don't want to see this anymore. I don't want to see the pointy W pants. Okay. This is much better. Very nice. All right, so the last piece on this I want to talk about when it comes to curvature and angles are sleeves. Now, sleeves can be pretty tricky to understand how to get the angle right, as well as trying to get the cut correct, and that's where angles and curvature come into play. So let's say you want to taper the sleeves in. Well, let's not say you usually do want to taper the sleeves in, and this is going to work the same as these other perpendicular intersecting angles. What you want to look at right here, because we know this is a straight seam, so we need a perpendicular seam on top of it. And so when we look at this angle here comes off like this, and you can actually add in a perpendicular internal line that will automatically create a perpendicular line like that. And you can cut that. Or you can just eyeball it, which is what I usually do. So that comes in about like that. And so this angle that your sleeves come off at always depends on the angle that the sleeve cap ends right in here. So sometimes your sleeve cap might be more of this angle, and that means the angle here would need to be here. And if this angle came in at more of this angle, then this would need to come like that. And then that would correctly create a nice clean cone shape, a nice clean taper of your sleeve. Because if you don't make these angles, these initial angles coming off the sleeve correct, like this or like this, if you just do these, like angle them, then you're gonna get some weird pinching in here, and it's just not gonna fit very well. So you want that initial angle to come off again at that perpendicular angle. The other thing that we can now understand is the shaping. So right in here, this shape, it goes like, you know, this. And well, since we've got this angle on here, this is now a cone shape. And when you have this cone shape, you need to add in the curvature. So we need to add in curvature here and curvature over here. And this needs to come off at 90 degrees. And then you will have a nice, smooth sleeve that is correct in terms of angle. And you can do that. Now that you understand what you need to do, you can do it for any type of sleeve. And especially with something like a short sleeve. Like if I angled this up even more, well, then you'd want less angle there, less angle here. And then what you can do is you can add in curvature here, because sometimes you want that to come down a little bit more. and your sleeve will go like that. Now, this is also important when you have long sleeves too, because a lot of times you'll have long sleeves, obviously. And so you want them to taper in like this. So this is why you would put this type of curve in here. You're just looking for that initial angle, and then you can curve it back out. So if this were, say, for example, a puff sleeve, like a very puffy sleeve, and you eventually wanted this sleeve to go out this way, up here, if you just had no curvature up here at this initial angle, well, let's see if we can get this to go. This, when you sew it together, is not going to fit correctly in the sleeve. And let's see if we can see that real quick here. It's kind of hard to tell, but there would be this kind of deformation in here because the angles they're not perpendicular. And they're going to push excess fabric right in here like this. So you can see that nasty fabric there. So what you want to do, if you're creating this type of puff sleeve, is you put this angle in. And this is what this angle right here does. It makes this come off at the correct angle, and then it will correct itself and puff out. Now, the other thing with these puffy sleeves, when you make them like this, and let's just fix this real quick. Okay. So right, let's just reiterate, the reason you have this initial curve in here is so that this connects properly down in here, or the sleeve connects up properly at the initial point down there. Okay, so let's fix this. Okay, so now we can, when we sew this up and look at it, now you can see that this is correct. It doesn't have that crazy puckering down there anymore. And that's why. And the other thing, of course, about this type of sleeve is when you're extending length like this, you have to add in the curvature. If you don't add in the curvature on these puffy sleeves, this will not be an even curve all the way around. You can see that down here, it's kind of got that point, like it goes down like that. Like you saw that uneven kind of cone I did earlier on. That's what it's doing there. So you've got to put in this curve, and that will make the sleeve even all the way around, because again, this is just a big cone, so you need that curvature. And that will allow you to make proper puffy sleeves. So that is how you apply curvature and angle to sleeves. All right. Okay, let's talk about some examples of using curves in a pattern. Now, the most obvious example is the waistband, because the waist is just kind of a big cone. So what I've got here is a regular waistband, or a regular rectangular waistband. Now, you can tell that because of this kind of floppy top here, there is too much length. What we need to do, and this is actually a good way of figuring out what needs to happen with a lot of your pattern edges. If there's a lot of excess fabric right here, what you can infer from that is that this length, this top length, is too long. So in some cases, you can use darts to reduce the length. In this case, we're going to use a curve to reduce the length to make this fit. So let's go ahead and look at the waist right here. There's a few important things. I've already talked a little bit about it, but this front part of the stomach here, there's not much curvature. It's fairly flat. So this part of the waistband doesn't need a lot of curvature. As we go over here, there's a lot more curvature. So this part up here, right up here, this is going to need more curvature. And it's going to continue on around the back. And the back actually needs slightly less curvature, but still a fair amount. So now we know that. I'm just going to use my fullness tool up here to create a curve. Now the first thing I want to do, let's is I'm going to curve it, but I'm not going to give it a huge curve. So let's do about 32. And I just want this to I just want enough curve that it fits around the front. So let's just do that. Okay, so now that fits pretty close around the front. Now I'm going to use my curve tool again and go from about right here to the back. Let's do that. And now I'm starting to add curvature from here into here. Or yeah. So it's still kind of floppy from here. And we'll go from there to there. So we'll go in here. And now I will reduce this line length right here. So I will move it down. And again, this line is staying the exact same length. So that bottom line is staying perfectly fitted. So this one will go, not too much, 23. So we'll do 23 millimeters there. And that might be too much. So let's reduce that curvature a little bit. I'm gonna undo that. We'll just go end. Just go 12. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Now I need to clean up these segment points, so I'm going to convert them into curve points. And now back here, I've still got a little bit of excess. So let's go ahead and go right in here. Look at that, to there. And we'll reduce the line length here by 14. And that did a pretty good job. Okay, so now what we have is a nicely fitted waistband. All right, just a really quick note on waistbands. You don't always need to make your waistband curved and fitted. In fact, a lot of times they're just straight strips. So when you would want to make your waistband curved is obviously if you want it to be very fitted. But it depends a lot on your model too. If the model has very curved hips like this, you're probably going to need some curvature. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a lot of sloppiness at the top. It also depends on the width of the waistband, because when we look at this is a very tall waistband. And when we look at the length on these edges, this here is 406.7, and way up here it's 340. So there's a pretty significant distance or length difference between the top and the bottom here. But if we look at the difference between this, which is 406, and this, which is 392, the difference is much less. So you wouldn't need the curvature quite as much. So the wider it is, the more, and again, it also depends on the hips. Like if you're using a male model, a lot of times the hips don't have nearly as much curvature. So most male waistbands are just a single, just like this. And they don't have any curvature. So you don't always need curvature. It depends on, the angle of the hips here and the width of the waistband. So just wanted to point that out. All right. Okay, now let's talk about converting darts into curves, which you're going to need to do sometimes. And it's really easy. A pretty common place you might want to do this is right here in the back. A lot of times jeans have a yoke in the back, and the yoke, sometimes it's just a shape that's cut out, but sometimes it's got the dart built in. And that's really easy to do. If your pants already have a dart, like this, and why shouldn't they, just draw an internal line across like this. So about in the position that a yoke would be on a pair of jeans. And that's this little kind of trapezoidal cutout thing back here. So you just need to go to the back of your dart, or you can go, you don't have to go right to the bottom of your dart if you don't want your yoke to be there. You'll just have a little bit of a dart left over under the yoke. And if that's okay with you, you can do it that way. So then what you do is you just cut and sew like this. And then let me line this up a little bit better. So add a point to the start and move this right there. Go a little bit higher. And then cut and sew. And then you just have to merge these two pieces together right where the dart was. And that's already looking a lot like a curve, but just convert your segment points into curve points or Bezier curves. And then just kind of smooth them out. And you'll have to do this manually, but it's pretty easy. Just check your sewing length, and you see I'm off by 0.1 and 0.3 millimeters, so that worked fine. And now you have this nice smooth yoke piece that has the dart built right in. And you can convert pretty much any dart. Well, I don't know about any dart, but most darts you can convert fairly easily to curves like this if you want to. Even up here, I could probably convert this big triangle dart into a curve right up here. So let's just try that. So I'll cut and sew this. Let me merge these together. And then just convert these into curve points. And let's see, so I got a little bit of excess right in here. So I'm probably gonna have to do some adjustment on this after. Okay, not too bad. But you see, I've got a little bit of puckering right up in here. So that's pretty easy to fix now that we know what to look for. I'm actually just going to kind of pull this curve down a little bit. So that's going to reduce the length in there. And I think I'll add a little bit of convex shape in there too. That did okay. So yeah, now that dart is just two curved opposing pieces. And now that you know what to look for, this makes sense. It's just this dart that's been moved and converted into a curve. So those are some examples of how you might convert darts into curves. Okay. All right. Now I want to talk about collars, but before I do, I want to talk about a pretty common fit issue that is not immediately obvious what it is or how to fix it. And that's this right here. If you have this front piece right here that is just kind of floppy and doesn't fit very well, this is just an alignment issue, and it's actually really easy to fix. So basically what happened is your pattern doesn't quite match up. Like the right here and right there don't match. So, and when you're working, things can get misaligned. So if this ever happens, all you have to do is grab this shoulder seam here and pull it in. And then we'll check it. And that's pulled it in a little bit. We'll pull it in a little bit more. And you're just aligning the front piece with the back piece. And so it's even on both sides. And then that pulls it nice and tight. Now, you don't want to go too far with it, because if you go too far, then this back can become really kind of start having the same issue. You just want to move the shoulder seams in and out until the front and back panel are both even and they don't have, any of that mess. So that's how you fix that issue, right? Okay. So what I want to touch on briefly are collars, because that's a good example of curvature in the pattern as well. Now what I've got here is just a straight rectangle with a slightly more rigid material applied. Now, when I first started and I was trying to kind of fit this collar to the back, what I do is just kind of do this. And as we know now, this is not good. And what happens is you get this little pinching in the back. So what we need to do is use curvature. And now that you understand what curvature is doing and why things are curved, it's much easier to adjust a collar. So I'm just going to add some curvature right in there. So right in this area here where there's a little bit of excess fabric. And we'll just kind of shorten this up a little bit. And that'll help get it closer. And you can see everything is now, all the angles are good, and it's shortening it, and it won't cause that pinching. And that collar just kind of goes right there. Now in the front, let's go ahead and add a little bit of curvature. Because you can see we want to bring this up a little bit here. So start, end. And collars really are fairly dependent on the shape of the neck hole as well. So it's really good to know how to adjust these so that you can have a collar that does what you want it to do. And once you know why it's doing what it does, that's, you know, that's what you want. So when you have a collar that swings up like this, it actually kind of pulls this collar up and it helps it stay up. Now, if you want a more casual collar, you can actually pull this out, this curvature downward, like this. Start, end, and just do something like this. And this, when you have a curvature like this will actually push the collar outward. So if you have a very casual collar, this will help open it up, and you'll get a little bit more of this kind of thing going on in here. So if the collar goes up, that means it's kind of pulling it in toward the neck, and out, you can get this type of effect. So it's just the curvature in here and in here that affects the way the collar works. So once you understand that, you can kind of adjust your collar any way you want, and you don't have to rely on just copying a pattern and wondering why it's not working or how to get it to do what you want. All right. All right, now what I want to touch on very briefly are skirts, because skirts use curvature and darts, and I actually think making a skirt is harder than making a pair of jeans, because skirts are, once you learn how to make a pair of pants, there's not much variation to it, but skirts are all over the place. But we'll make a basic skirt here. So what I've got are two panels that I've just sewn onto this waistband here, and I've purposely made this panel quite a bit wider than what I need because I do want to make a fitted skirt. So to fit this skirt, what I want to do is I want to fit it around this widest part of the butt, basically. So I want it to fit at that point. So I'm just going to kind of adjust the width of this entire panel here. I'm going to simulate, and that's actually just about right. So you don't want to make it too tight. Just kind of give a little bit more here. Just fitted. And this is the only part we're worried about right now. Let me turn off the activation there. Okay, maybe a little bit looser. Okay. So now that we've done that, I'm going to just go ahead and add in a seam line right here. So I'm going to cut this in half, and I'm going to cut and sew. Now what I can do, first I want to actually segment up this waistband too. So I'm going to add a point on the start so this waistband is in 2 segments. Now I can, let's see, go ahead and I'm going to add in a point right about here, which matches up with the widest part. And I'm just going to drag this over. So that's essentially creating my dart, and I'll add a little bit of shaping, or my side seam on the side there. And that's, again, shortening up this line length up here so it fits better here. Now, when we look at our sewing line lengths, we're still off by 10. And since I don't need so much shaping in the front, I don't need darts and things in the front here, I'm just going to move this over by about 10 until the sewing lines match up. So by 1. And that matches up. Okay, so now this front piece is fitted pretty well. Now let's look at this back here. So what I want to do in the back also is add a bit of a dart right here, and we'll align this the x-axis. Shorten this up. And create this kind of curved seam over here as well. So this is just a curved dart on the side of the skirt. Actually, I think I can probably pull this down. And I'm not really using any formula for this. I'm just kind of going by how it looks. Okay, let's check our sewing here. So I'm still off by 22. And I actually want to check my strain map here. So that's a little strained in there, but it's not too bad. We're doing all right. Okay, so now we just need to add some darts in the back here. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm not going to measure anything. I'm just going to look at this and say, okay, 22.9. We'll add a dart. And again, just make sure the dart doesn't go across about right here, which is another apex. So I'm going to make a dart about 22 millimeters. Just uniform split that. Pull down. Too high. Oops. And sew it up. Okay. But remember, you're not quite done because we need to correct for the dart right in here. So this one doesn't take much. Sometimes it'll take more. But now that you know what you're looking for, it's pretty easy to do to make this nice and even. And then we can sew it back together. And it's all lined up. Okay, so with this type of pencil skirt, a lot of times what you want is it to conform really tight. Now, in most patterns, this is what they say a pencil skirt looks like, but we need to kind of tighten it up. So one way we can do this is pull in these side seams right in here because they need to be kind of in like this. And then I'm just going to convert these to curve points and kind of adjust the curvature in here so that it conforms to the shape like that. And that does an okay job, but it doesn't quite conform it in the back right here. Now, I've never seen a pattern do this, but since we're working in 3D and you're not making these clothes for your life, we can kind of get away with some stuff that you wouldn't want to do when you're sewing, if you were sewing this in real life. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add in a point right about there. So where is that? Okay, right about there. And then bring this in right here. So it tapers in at the back too. Now when we do this, okay, that's fine. But I want it to be curved because I don't want this kind of point right there. So we're just going to make this, convert that to a curve point so the shaping kind of conforms back here, and then just kind of do that so everything fits real snug around the back. Now, when we do that, obviously the hems are all wonky because we've started adding in these angles. So let's just go ahead and adjust them and use what we know, which is, okay, so this needs to come down and maybe up a bit more. And then this right here, we can see that this angle isn't right. So let's bring this up so that it starts at about a 90-degree angle. And then we need to adjust that curvature back. Just looking at this to figure out how to make it nice and straight. And then obviously here again, the angle isn't right. So we'll pull this up, add in a bit of curvature here. And then I think this might still be a little bit tight in the back. So I'm gonna loosen it up because you don't want it to be too tight because you want it to be able to make those nice folds and wrinkles. So just kind of loose there, maybe a little bit more tapered in the back. And so now using what we know about curves and darts, we are able to just make a really tightly fitted pencil skirt. And when we check our pose, hopefully this will work. And let's actually check the strain map. Okay. So yeah, that looks pretty good. It fits pretty well. This is, says everything fits real nice. And then when we pose it, we should still get the proper kind of, yeah. So it's tight, but it still allows movement and it still allows for these wrinkles to form. If you simply make a skirt like this really tight, when you pose the character, it's going to be so tight that these wrinkles just don't form, or they're really deformed and they don't look right. So getting your garments fitted right is really important to making these folds and wrinkles look right and correct. So yeah, there you go. Okay, now I want to talk about something that you're going to see in a lot of sewing patterns that can be very confusing. I know it confused me for a long time. And that's something like this right here. Now, when you see this, at first you wondered, how do I make this? Do I cut up a bunch of pieces and then sew them on? What's happening here? So this is the slash and spread technique. And they use this in real sewing. They take a pattern piece and they actually cut it up into pieces and then they spread it out like that. And the actual pattern piece is not a bunch of pieces cut apart. It's actually the outline of this piece. So what they're doing is this line length here is the same length as it is when it's all put together, but this outer length is much larger. So this is doing the same thing as I've been using with my fullness tool. So if we want to recreate that, we would just use our fullness tool. Now let me show you an example of what that's doing. So let's say I wanted to add 250 millimeters out on the end of this. So I'm going to go out. I'm going to add 250 millimeters. Okay, let's deactivate these real quick. Okay, so that kind of creates this nice little wavy bottom because this outer edge right here is 250 millimeters longer now. But if we just curved it, and I'm going to use my curvature tool or my fullness tool like this, and I'm going to add 250 millimeters here. Oops. Like this. Let's go and pull that up to 250. Now this line length in here is again staying the same length. And I've just added, so now this line length here, 678.1 and 678.2, it's the same. So this is how you achieve this kind of wavy look without getting the puckering up here. Because this line is matched up with the hem, but this line is much longer. Whereas if you just pulled it out, you would get a bunch of gathering at the hemline, which is an effect you might want. But anyway, that's what this. Whenever you see something spread out like this, they're just adding in that fullness and using the slash and spread method. And you have, if you're in real life sewing, you can't just kind of bend a piece of cloth. But that's the strength of digital sewing like this, is that I can just bend it with that fullness tool. It's such a powerful tool. Anyway, I just wanted to explain what this is. All right. Okay, one more thing about these kind of roughly things at the bottom here. If you're working from a pattern and you make the shape that the pattern says, but it doesn't really look good, you don't have to live with it. You can change it, and it's pretty easy to change and know what you're doing when you're changing it. Because remember, you don't want to think of this edge as a curve, a shape. You want to think of it as a single thread. And if you pull this thread tight, which it has been, it's basically a straight line here, and think about what'll happen on the edge. It ruffles, but it ruffles depending on this length. And we can change length in specific areas. So I'm just going to use my fullness tool and say there's not enough, waviness over here. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to figure out where I want it, and I'll just go about right there, do that. And then I'm just going to add length to this outer edge. So I'm going to go like this. And so now it's the curvature in this area is kind of less, and it's much more over in this area. So let's Look at this. And so now you can kind of control how these, how much waviness you get in certain areas of your skirt, or in this case, just kind of like this flare on the bottom of a skirt. And say I want more over here, and just add in some length. That'll add in a little bit of length back there. And likewise, you can also take out length. You can use your fullness tool to go in and just say, okay, I want this to be a little bit less. So you can do that. You can reduce this line length here. And with all of these adjustments, the length, the actual length of this is staying exactly the same. So you're not changing the fit at all. And that way you can just go in and kind of create the type of ruffles that you want. So you really do have a lot of control as long as you know how, and now you know how. All right. Okay, the last thing I want to cover are something called dart equivalents. Dart equivalents are things like pleats, gathers, and elastic. And basically all those things are doing are they're taking a larger amount of fabric and pushing it down into a smaller length of fabric. And each one of those things has its own unique challenges, because whenever you take that fabric like this and push it in, there is deformation that happens along the edge. I mean, it doesn't just shrink down and everything else remains the same. Now, this kind of stuff is a little bit more complicated. Too complicated for this video, which is already pretty bloated. So I'm not really gonna cover it. I'm just going to kind of tell you that, okay, so for example, when you look at these patterns, this is where the patterns get confusing, is with these pleats and gathers and things. Because this right here, this is pleat. This is a big pleat. So this is hard to understand, and it's hard to do. It's hard to explain and hard to do properly as well. So maybe I'll do a whole separate video on this. So this is an example of a pleated front. Something like this is, you know, that a lot of gathering right in here, and you have to do it in a specific way. And the way gathering works is that it's similar to fullness, where you can't just extend out a straight line. You have to kind of do like the spreading of the spaghetti and create a curved edge, but then there's also pleats and things in here. But these are called dart equivalents, and basically that's just when you take a larger amount of fabric into a smaller amount of fabric without using a traditional, you know, dart. And then sometimes you'll see patterns like this, and what this is doing is this is creating those little ruffles along the edge because this edge is longer, and they're using the slash and spread method. That's actually something that's a little bit easier to explain. If you've ever seen the dress with the ruffles all down the front, and you've ever wondered how that's done, you can actually do that pretty easily in with the fullness tool again. So I'm going to use the fullness tool. Normally you'd use the slash and spread, but that's kind of a pain in the butt, and you'll see why. So if I just wanted a bunch of ruffles down the front of this skirt, I just need to extend the length of this, right? This line needs to be longer. So I'll use my fullness tool and fullness tool on the other side, and then I will just expand it out. Now, this is the other awesome thing about the fullness tool, is that when it's creating a curve, it doesn't just curve straight lines. It will curve these lines with shapes on them already, and it will retain the curve just in a bent way. So when this gets pulled back to normal, this curve right here will remain essentially the same curve on the this curve will remain the same when this is returned back to a normal shape. Anyway, so let me just do this, and let me do this, get this together, and now that has that's how you create all those kind of ruffles down the front on something like that. And then of course you would probably want to put on some elastic on this front just to get it to stretch properly, and then just pull your elastic in. And so that's how you can create that ruffle effect on the front. And this elastic is a dart equivalent. because you have to account for the deformation that happens when you take a larger amount of fabric and push it into a smaller amount of fabric. Anyway, that's pretty much the basics of pattern making and understanding patterns. So I think what I'll do next is I'll try and go through a bunch of patterns and give you some examples and show you some stuff. All right. So one of the coolest parts about understanding pattern making is being able to look at a sewing pattern and just understand it. And so what I've got here is a pattern, and I've created it on this model. Now what's important, I cannot stress this enough, and I stress this a lot in when I stream, is that you should never trace your pattern. I did not trace my pattern here. What I did is I started out with that basic block shape, and then I just began modifying it. Now, the reason you don't want to trace patterns, especially ones you find on the internet, is because, again, the pattern was not designed for your model. The pattern was designed for some specific shaped model that doesn't have the same measurements as your model. And we can kind of see this here. Now, this pattern is actually better than a lot of them you find on the internet. So let me just copy and paste this over. So when I try and actually line up, and you can see here, this garment fits quite well. It fits very well. But when I bring this up and I try and match it up, it doesn't match very well. If I try and match length, then it's way too big up here. And if I try and match a line up here, then it becomes way too small. And you can see the natural waist isn't in the correct position, and things just don't match up. So if you traced this, things would just be, it would kind of work, but it would be off by enough that it wouldn't look good. And then you just have to spend your time kind of tweak something. So if you trace something like this and you try to adjust it after the fact, it's so much more difficult. It is just incredibly difficult because you have to move this over here, then move this over here, but then that changes this over here. And it's just a miserable experience trying to adjust like this. So what you want to do is, again, you want to take that basic block shape like this, or whatever, however you want. You know, there's different types of block shapes you can start out with, and then say, okay, I'm looking at this. Now, this is a little bit of an interesting pattern because this does have a big pleat right here, and that's part of that dart equivalent I was talking about. So what this is just a big pleat. And so if I were doing this, I would ignore this and I would just build this piece here, which I know is just a princess seam and a princess seam here. And actually, the pictures are generally a lot more helpful than the patterns a lot of times. So I would just make that princess seam like that. You know, I'd kind of do that. Cut and sew, oops. And this is a lot like, you know, kind of sculpting a piece of clay in ZBrush, or that basic polygon shape, and slowly getting the basic shapes down and then refining them slowly and just, yeah, refining them. Yes. Well, anyway. So you do that, and then you do this, and then the same thing on the back. So you've got a seam in the back, and you'd cut this seam on the back, and then you'd work on the bottom half here. So I'd actually separate these two and then work on the bottom half and work on the bottom half here. Oh, and it looks like, okay, so the top half is also a separate piece here. So what I do is I would just come in and look at this. Okay, so it's cut off right there. So I'd cut it off right there. And again, I would, if you start off with this shape that fits, then all these adjustments you make will also fit, and you will eventually end up with this pattern, and you'll be using this over here as a guide, but not to trace. So that's the really, really fun part of learning this, is that you can understand what's happening. So there you go. Okay, now here's another pattern that I did, and I've pretty heavily modified this one, obviously. And I just started with this pattern right here. And again, I didn't trace it. I just kind of used it as a guide because, okay, you start with the basic thing, then you kind of make a princess seam, cut it out here. And then this is that curve out here that creates that ruffle in the front. And then from there, I just continued to modify it. So that's what's really cool about this, is that you can just take a basic pattern like this and really make it fun and interesting. And it's really cool. So this is something you should definitely learn. And as long as you know the few basic things, that's most of it. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. Now, one very important thing to know is that a lot of patterns you're going to find on the internet, whether it be Pinterest or Google image search or something else, are not good patterns. And you definitely don't want to trace them. Now, a bad pattern doesn't mean a useless pattern, because even bad patterns can be very useful. So for example, you're going to come across a lot of patterns that look like this. And this pattern here is not this dress. This is just some dress they found on Pinterest, probably, that's like, oh, this is a stylish dress. Let me do an approximation of what that pattern might look like. And so this is actually helpful because generally the basic shapes are going to be right. Like, okay, so they cut this off here, and so this is a waistband. They connect this up, and it kind of makes a curved waistband, which is this right here. And then they've extended out this, so this is one big piece, and then it's gathered in at the waist, and it is gathered in at the waist. And then the sleeve up here, they've done it correctly. They've expanded the top to create this kind of thing over here. But then this, if you just did this, this is not how you would get these proper sleeves. So I used this as a guide, and then you just kind of fixed it. And obviously there's some pretty dramatic differences between that pattern and this one over here. And as you can see with these sleeves, okay, let me just point out this sleeve thing one more time, because if you don't add this shaping, what'll happen when you try and make these puff sleeves is they'll be way puffy down here and there won't be a lot of puff on top. So really important to get the curve right over here. So just be aware that a lot of patterns you find on the internet are just not good patterns. Okay, now the last point I want to make about patterns is about historical patterns. I know a lot of people are like, ooh, I'm gonna make some cool Victorian style dress or a really cool Victorian gentleman's jacket. I hate historical patterns. Historical patterns are some of the most insane, nonsensical pieces of I don't know what. They're just ridiculous patterns. And so I've got some patterns here, and this is some examples of patterns, just so you can see. So you might have something like this. I can figure most patterns out. I don't know what's happening here. Now, there's a couple of problems here that happen with historical patterns beyond the actual patterns just being incredibly confusing. The first is that a lot of times they are incomplete. I'm pretty sure this is incomplete. There's probably another page somewhere. So a lot of times you'll just get like half a pattern or a few pieces, or these patterns are just done really weird. If you're starting out, do not use historical patterns. It will make you just hate Marvelous Designer or Clo3d and never want to use it again, because they're the most I hate historical patterns like this. What? Something like that. Even the ones that are kind of better, like this is a much better historical pattern, but this is not going to end up looking like this. I can almost guarantee you. When you actually break down these historical patterns, even though they look weird, they're still just doing the same thing. Like the darts in the front, the back, there's another seam line here. If you kind of put it all together, the overall shaping isn't going to be that much different than a modern pattern. You're much better off just creating a modern pattern and adding some elements that will help it look more like one of these Victorian outfits. And another problem you're going to have with these Victorian style patterns is that a lot of times there's like bustle cages and different things that the structural elements underneath the outfit that if you just make the pattern, it's just going to be like there's no structure to hold it up. So stay away from historical patterns unless you're like super advanced level. Historical patterns are for, they're like hard mode, but super hard mode, whatever the hardest mode is. All right. Yeah. All right. So that's the basics to pattern making for the 3D artist. And I really, really hope you learned something, because if not, I should just give up. So, till next time, bye.